One of the presidents of a big country stood up and said, well, sir, if we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, you didn't pay? You're delinquent? He said, yes, let's say that happened. No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
Former U.S. President and current Republican frontrunner for the presidential nomination, Donald Trump, threatening to abandon NATO allies who don't meet the alliance's 2% spending target, and even suggesting he'd encourage Russian attacks on those allies.
NATO cannot be a la carte military alliance. Cannot be a military alliance that works depending on the humor of the President of the U.S.
Got to be careful. I can't talk about things that have been said on the campaign trail. All I can tell you is that under this particular president, President Biden, as Commander-in-Chief, NATO is now more relevant, stronger, bigger than it's ever been before. We will defend, if needed, every inch of NATO territory. That's what the Commander-in-Chief of the United States ought to be saying when it comes to NATO.
Canada has never met NATO's target for member nations to spend 2% of GDP on defense. We sit at about 1.3%. Earlier today, I spoke with Canada's ambassador to Ukraine, Natalka Cmoc, about that and Canada's support for Ukraine's fight against Russia. Have a listen. Hi, Ambassador. It's good to meet you and good to have you on our program today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I have a number of questions for you about Canada's role in Ukraine, but I have to start on the comments over the weekend, which have potentially big implications for all NATO members and, of course, the war on Ukraine. The likely GOP nominee for president, Donald Trump, said that he told allies he would, quote, encourage Russia to attack any NATO member that failed to meet the alliance's target of 2% of their GDP. What do you make of those comments?
Interesting. I think, haven't really planned to answer that one. I think it's kind of outside of my scope, actually. But yeah, that's really outside of the scope of Ukraine. So.
I guess the reason that I ask is maybe I take a different view that it's not necessarily outside of the scope, because, of course, so much of what Ukraine has spoken about, and its president, for example, in trying to convince the rest of the world that aid to Ukraine is necessary, is because it's not just in the interest of Ukraine, but Ukraine's allies, because Putin won't stop in Ukraine. That's what its president keeps telling us, that other NATO allies could be next. This caused a huge reaction here in this side of the border as well as south of the border. How important do you think it is for NATO allies to be strong in their allyship?
I think it's really critical, actually, because this war that we're seeing in Russia and Ukraine really is not just a war about Russia and Ukraine. It really is a war between two systems. So the sort of one that respects the rules-based order and democracy, and then the other one, which is the authoritarian systems that have united themselves for power. So I think it's really critical at this time to stay together and keep supporting Ukraine, because they are really fighting a war for all of us.
And what is your sense on the ground there of the degree to which that is happening?
I think that Ukraine is putting up actually a very good fight. I didn't think that they would be able to hold it this far. So Ukraine has really proven themselves on the front line. Also, we've seen some very good progress that they've made on the Black Sea Fleet, and they've opened up the corridor for trade. So these are things that are quite remarkable.
So is it your sense that Ukraine is making progress? And I ask you against the backdrop of, if you open a paper here, or in particular in the United States, so much of what is being discussed right now is the sense that there is this stalemate, particularly informed by just late last week, the president of Ukraine removing his top general following an op-ed that he wrote basically using that language. Is it your sense that there is not a stalemate?
So it's a tricky question. I think that they are progressing quite well with what they have. What they have made clear to the world is that they need more support in terms of munitions. So that they have not been silent about that. So I think it's an opportunity for all of us to help support Ukraine. And I think if allies supported now, they could really push even more aggressively.
And is it your view that the speed with which that aid is delivered at this point, especially given, for example, the holdup in the U.S. at the moment, is of top importance? That's certainly what, for example, Ukraine's foreign minister conveyed to us on our program just a few weeks ago.
No, that is correct. I think that getting that support to Ukraine now is very critical, because that could make the difference for them getting ahead of what you've described as a stalemate.
So Canada has been at the forefront of delivering military aid. I think it's $2.4 billion in total. I'm sure you'll correct me if my numbers aren't fully up to date. There is one piece of that aid, though, that military aid specifically, that is now long delayed, more than a year. That's the air defense system that Canada was to have purchased from the U.S. and have it delivered to Ukraine. When I spoke to Minister Kuleba a few weeks ago, he had no update on the timeline for that. Do you have an update you can share with Canadians tonight?
Yeah, so you're talking about what's called the NASAM system. So basically, Canada had purchased that on behalf of Ukraine. And then now, from what I understand, it's not really my area of specialty, but from what I understand, it's Ukraine is negotiating the timing and the final agreement with the U.S. directly.
So you don't, is there no role for Canada at this point? Is it mostly just between the U.S. and Ukraine, or is Canada trying to expedite those conversations?
I imagine that they are, but really Canada has already provided the funds for the air defense.
Okay. And are there plans or are there conversations that you're involved in about additional aid? And do you have a sense in what form that would take, going from Canada to Ukraine, of course?
So Canada has made it really clear that they're unwavering in their support. And so they're always open to having those discussions with Ukraine, with whatever else might be needed. We're there to listen. And I think we are still one of the top donors for Ukraine. And we are also there as, I think, a true friend. And I think Minister Joly's recent visit, shows that. She had very good meetings with President Zelensky and Prime Minister Shmyhal and her counterpart. They continued to look at ways that Canada can continue to support. And then one very clear way that she's provided support is launching this international coalition for returning children, which is a very important priority for Ukraine as well. So that was launched on February 2nd, and that was extremely appreciated by Ukraine.
Yeah, we understand the First Lady of Ukraine is certainly very involved in that as well. Okay, Ambassador, I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time today very much. Thank you.